All right, we'll call the May 12th, 2025 City Council Workshop to order. Roll call.
Joe Von Toma.
Toby Nelson.
Sam Solars.
David Paradise.
Michelle Otto.
Jessica Boniwell.
Jackie Hines.
Dan Reamer.
All right, let's get down to business. 2024 financial statement and audit presentation from Abdo.
Good evening. I'm Andy, the audit partner, and Michelle's with me, in charge on the audit. So we'll split this presentation up and go through that. Feel free to ask questions as we're going through it. Any discussion as we're going through is great, and you don't have to wait to the end to do that. So what we'll cover is the audit results. We'll look at all your different funds, starting with your general fund. We'll look at the governmental funds, your special revenue, capital project, and debt service funds. And then Michelle will take over the enterprise funds, looking at the cash flows from operations and ending cash balances over a four-year trend, and then look at some key performance indicators compared to other cities within Wright County and then other cities throughout the state of Minnesota with similar populations. So the end result of the audit is that we issue an opinion on your financial statements. So that's really what you're hiring us for, is to give an opinion on your financial statements. We gave an unmodified opinion. We also issue a report on Minnesota legal compliance. So we test about 7 different areas, anywhere from cash and investment to contracting and bidding to debt service. As part of the audit, we do gain understanding of the city's internal controls. We're not necessarily testing them and giving an opinion on them, but there are a couple findings there. So we have 3 internal control findings and 1 legal compliance finding. The first 2 findings there are very common in small to medium-sized organization. They're not new findings this year. They've been there for a number of years. Again, very common. The first one, the preparation of financial statements. Since we're doing the audit and preparing the financial statements, that's reported as an internal control finding. Again, like I mentioned, very common. The city does have compensating controls in place where Jackie and Jessica review the financial statements before they're issued in final. The second one there is a limited segregation of duties, really a result of the small number of people within the accounting function. Pretty hard to segregate 100%. Again, you do have compensating controls in there with the finance committee and information coming to the board. So with both those, it's important to pay attention to the financial information throughout the year. A couple new findings as part of that. We did test some of the utility billing. We did find where the city council did approve new water rates for commercial and residential. The residential were implemented, and then in error, the commercial was not implemented. The new rates weren't implemented there. But I believe that's all taken care of at this point. And then part of the contracting and bidding, the city's required to get 2 or more quotes for certain purchases. And we noticed only 1 quote was received for 2 different purchases. So we just recommend the city get those quotes, and then also part of that statute is retaining them on file for documentation. So any questions on the findings that we have presented this year? All right, we'll jump into some of the financial information, starting with the general fund. So here we give you a graph of 5-year history of your ending general fund balance, which is that top line, the orange bar. We also have your general fund budget in there, which is the yellow bar, and then your fund balance policy. So you have a policy where you don't want that fund balance to go below 40% of your next year's budget. You can see you've been well above that each of the years presented. At the end of 2024, you're at about 124%. Down a little bit in percentage from last year, which was 156%, but up in dollar amounts. You can see the total fund balance budget increased up to $1.7 million from the $1.3 million of the 2024 budget. And we look at the activity during the year on the next slide. So slide 7, we give you a summary budget to actual in your general fund. So total revenues, the actual amounts ended at just over $1.6 million compared to your budget of 1.28 million, so variance of 320,000. The largest variance was within licenses and permits due to the building activity, followed by some of the ARPA money, so the COVID money you received from the federal government. Some of that was spent and not budgeted for in 2024. And then interest income on investments was higher than budgeted, and then you had some special assessments that weren't budgeted to. The expenditures, just under 1.6 million, so over budget by about 292,000. A number of that is related to some of the information and the revenue variances, specifically in public safety and the building inspection. So that was over budget, really offset with those licenses and permits. And then you did have some capital outlay projects, about 134,000 related to those assessments, and future assessments will help cover those costs. The city did sell some land for 74,000. You'll see in the other financing sources. So total fund balance increased to 102,000, ending at the 2.1 million. So that's the number we were looking at the previous slide. And then the next two slides will give you a 3-year history of your general fund revenues and then your expenditures. A couple items to point out here. Your taxes have gone down each of the 3 years. That is your main revenue source, followed by local government aid. That really is the reason for that fund balance policy of 40%. You don't receive your first tax settlement from the county until about halfway through the year, so you need that fund balance to cover your expenditures. The intergovernmental, that did increase in 23, dropped down a little bit in 24. That big increase is really related to that COVID funding, so some of that was recognized in 23 and in 2024. General fund expenditures, like we saw in the budget, most areas are increasing. General government increased each of the last 3 years. Really your main expenditure, followed by your public safety. That increase we see from 23 to 24 is related to that building activity, so the building inspection fees that were offset with the licenses and permits. Any questions with the general fund? All right, we'll move on to the special revenue funds. You have 5 different special revenue funds with total fund balance ending at 3.4 million. Compared to 3.1 million last year, so an increase of 312,000. The small cities and the EDA fund are restricted. You'll see that in the graph below, fairly consistent over the 3 years presented, with other fund balance categories increasing. The largest fund is your fire special revenue fund, ending at just over 1.7 million, an increase of 202 from the previous year. If we look at your capital project funds, you have 3 capital project funds with total fund balance of 1.2 million, increase about 27,000. The largest one, your general capital project, ending fund balance 1.7 million, up 274,000. Your street improvement fund does have a deficit as you finish that downtown improvement project, so the city should look to figure a way that they want to eliminate that deficit, whether it's a transfer from the general fund, the general capital project fund, or other sources. And then you have your AUAR fund. That deficit's consistent with the previous year. Really, the city's looking to fund that with future development in the future. Your debt service fund. So here's your bonds outstanding in your governmental funds. Some of these bonds are reported in your enterprise funds, your water sewer funds, which you'll see on the following slides. But total bonds outstanding of just under 5.8 million, maturing out to 2042. With the bulk of that, your downtown improvement bonds that were issued in 2021. Here there's about just under 5.4 million outstanding. We do give the next 10 years principal and interest payments. You'll see in the graph there. Really, it's important to monitor the sources, which all these bonds are being paid back with taxes, so making sure you get that tax levy correctly certified so you meet your principal and interest payments. So with that, I'll turn it over to Michelle to cover the enterprise funds, starting on page 13.
Great. Thank you, Andy. All right, so we're going to look at your enterprise funds here, the water, sewer, wastewater. The first slide here is the water fund, and you'll see two different graphs on this page. The top graph here, you're looking at your operating receipts, which is the orange bar there, and then we're comparing it to both the operating costs and debt payments. What we like to see is that orange bar. We would ideally like it to be greater than the yellow and black bar, because that way your operating receipts can cover both the debt payments and the cost. So I know the city raised the water rates last year, and we encourage the city to continually be conscious of your water rates and evaluate those, whether it's commercial rates or not. It's important that your operating receipts can cover both the debt payments and the cost associated with that. The bottom graph there, that looks at your target balance, which is that black line. In the city's target balance is your debt service for 6 months of payments, or 6 months of operating costs plus your debt service payments. So you can see the orange bar representing the cash and investments can cover that or has exceeded that target balance, and that's good to see. The next slide is the sewer fund, kind of opposite of what we saw in the water fund. There's a larger gap between that orange bar, the operating receipts, and the debt service and operating cost. So what that means is you are able to pay the principal or the debt payments. Then you will see in the bottom slide a similar concept here, the target balance and cash and investments. You'll notice after 2021, there was a dip in that bar. It's due to the spend down of bond proceeds. And so that is the sewer fund. And the storm fund, you'll notice in the top graph there, they're pretty consistent with your receipts compared to the disbursements and operating cost. And you'll also notice prior to 2021, there was no debt, so that's why you don't see any of the black bar on that 2021. Then again, similar to the slide before, you'll see that decrease after 2021 in the bottom graph due to the spend down of the bond proceeds. And your wastewater treatment fund, you'll notice here that there is no debt in the wastewater treatment fund. Your receipts, your operating receipts are covering the operating cost. And when we look at the bottom graph there, we see that there is a little bit of a cushion between that black line for the target balance and the cash and investments. And so we like to encourage cities to be very conscious about if you're doing any type of planning for infrastructure, that cash and investment balance is going to be very key for that planning. I even think Andy wanted to mention a few things about it, or maybe at the end.
Yeah, with any of these funds in your capital project fund, I know in the past you've done your long-term planning, and really that in these enterprise funds and then that capital fund, the cash balance there, anything above that black line is, kind of for future planning of capital or available. And what we do recommend is you continually look at that long-term plan and look to update that plan. So I know you got some big costs coming up in the wastewater treatment plant potentially. That's really going to help you give an idea and help answer the questions of what direction to go, how to pay for it, how does it affect our tax levy, et cetera, all those pieces. So something to keep in mind there.
Thank you. Move to the next slide here. So this is your cash and investment balances as a whole. We looked at cash and investments in the previous slides for the enterprise fund, for your water, sewer, wastewater treatment, but this is big picture. And you'll see that the past 3 years have been fairly consistent for your cash and investment balances. And that's good to see there. We'll look at some key performance indicators. What we are looking at here, we compare the city of Montrose to some of its peer groups. So the class 4 cities would be those that are a similar size, and then the Wright County cities with the yellow bar, of course, are the cities in Wright County. The tax rate, we see it in that first graph on the left there. We see the same pattern as other cities in your peer group. And I just wanted to point out that that NA there is because, unfortunately, the state does not release that information until later in the year. And we will update this when it's available. But we do anticipate the city of Montrose kind of following along with the peer group trend of the tax rate slightly decreasing there. Whereas in taxes per capita, similar to the peer group, that line is increasing, the city of Montrose, and we also see that with the other peer group. For debt, this first graph looks at the amount owed. You see a bond was issued in 2021, so there was that increase there. But you'll see over time, as principal and interest payments are made, that line is going to slowly go down. The debt service expenditures as a percent of total expenditures, that can vary, and it's primarily related to principal and interest increases. A lower percentage generally means that the government has more flexibility. And then for expenditures, the first graph here, current expenditures per capita, it gives you some good information because it breaks out the total government expenditures. So it doesn't include water or sewer there, but it also compares to your peer groups. And you'll notice that Montrose is slightly lower than the peer groups. Whereas the capital expenditures per capita, that one can fluctuate. You'll notice the larger increase in 2022, and that was related to your downtown improvement project. And then less items in 23 and 24. So that covers the 2024 audit summary. Wanted to say thank you to Jackie and the team at the city. She's very helpful and responsive, and anything we need, she makes the audit process go very smoothly. So we appreciate that. And I'll turn it over to Andy if there's any other questions.
Yeah, we're happy to take any other questions. I know in the past at the actual council meeting, I just would get up and just give a quick, really just cover the audit opinion. You guys can feel free to ask any questions there, but don't plan to go through the presentation at the council meeting unless you guys want me to. I'm fine doing that too, but it's up to you.
That's fair. Any questions? Can you remind me of the unmodified opinion? What does that mean again?
So really, it's the best opinion you can get, a clean opinion. So the unmodified is equivalent to clean. Okay. So if it was modified, then there would be, something that we can't give a full clean opinion on. It's a good question.
Now, as we start to plan some of these bigger projects, being wastewater treatment, and then further down the road some sort of water treatment. As we sit currently, are we looking okay as far as?
That's $1 million question.
I know it is, right?
Like a $14 million.
I was gonna say, it's a multi-million-dollar question.
So the good thing is in your wastewater treatment plant, like Michelle covered, you do have, you have some cash reserves in there, nothing that will, based on talking to Jessica, that will cover the full cost of the project. So it's really a factor of, in that one and, planning it out and figuring out, hey, what our rates gonna have to be to cover the project, and looking at that over, a 5 to 10 year period, because you can spend down that cash a certain level, but then you want to start building it back up for future ones too. So it all comes into how much cash you want to spend, how much do we want to bond for, how are we going to pay back that bond. You do have, that $1.7 million in your capital project fund too, that, you know, that can help serve as, you know, potentially an interfund loan if you wanted to use some of that in your enterprise fund, so that you have some flexibility there too. But it really comes down to, you know, what other projects does the city have too, that are street or building or,
How much time do you have?
yeah. And that's what I was getting into, that, because like that, the comprehensive long-term financial plan really covers all funds of the city. It looks at the projects out there, you know, if we do this one this year, what happens to our levy or our bonds, and it really plays out a picture to help give the council, you know, the tool to make a decision of how much do we want to spend, when do we want to do these, do we need to spread them out, do we want to increase our tax levy 50%, or do we want to keep it at 20 or 10? And so that's really the answer to your question there.
And that's why we have Jackie. Any other questions? Nope. Okay, I think we're good.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, this time I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn.
I will make the motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
I
Aye.
We're adjourned. 6:21.